You may as well come. I know you're volunteering to put out flags, but feel free to come take a seat. Everyone, there's plenty of it, and over there's no sun. So good afternoon. I am Major General Retired Debbie Ashenhurst, the Director of Veteran Services for this great state of Ohio. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful afternoon for this 9/11 commemorative flag placement. And I just think this is the coolest thing, and the wonderful thing is that my office is right over there, so once those flags are up, I'll be able to look down on it and have this as a great memory. So, you know, at one moment, I find myself believing that I can't believe it's been 20 years since that horrible attack in our homeland. And as I remember that day with great clarity, as if it had just happened last week or last month, not 20 years ago. Now, I remember my initial thought that it was an aviation accident, right? That first plane hit. And then the shocking reality hit that some organization had the audacity to shake the core of our previously safe and secure nation. Yeah, in the next moment, it seems like it was a really long time ago. So long ago, in fact, that a number of those who are serving our great nation, our warriors and our first responders, a number of them weren't even alive at the time of the attack. Or they were so young that they didn't experience that gut-wrenching, horrible day. But here we are, 20 years later, hosting, attending, participating in events to ensure that we don't forget, that we never forget the impact of that day. So thank you for being here with us today to honor, remember those who can't be here to remind us. So if you would please stand with me as we open with a prayer and a moment of silence directed by Senator Herschel Craig. Senator Craig is the Assistant Minority Whip representing Ohio's 15th District. Senator Craig proudly served our nation in the United States Army, and is an experienced leader within the Columbus community and throughout my career. For somehow, every time I turn around, I'm running into the great Herschel Craig. So, sir, please take the microphone.
Let us pray. God, you have been thy dwelling place for all generations, from everlasting to everlasting. Thou art God. We come today on this solemn occasion of the 20th year anniversary of 9/11 with a heavy heart. God, it is our continued fervent prayer for the families and children of the thousands of fallen and seriously injured from this unspeakable, unconscionable, and deeply horrific act of violence. God, help us to remember with reverence the first responders who paid the full measure of their service through their selfless acts of bravery and sacrifice to save countless lives, and the ordinary citizens who sacrificed their lives through the many, many extraordinary and heroic acts of service and devotion to save others. God, thank you for the continual healing and restoration of our nation. God, we pray for the men and women in our armed services who valiantly protect us and are in harm's way all over the world. God, please continue to strengthen our resolve and guide our deliberations in our leadership in the world before us. God, where there is conflict and dispute in our world, we pray for your guidance and wisdom for justice and peace to be realized. And God, help each of us to dedicate our lives to be a light of hope and inspiration where there is pain and suffering, and assist the marginalized and vulnerable in our own communities. God, when our memorial service today has concluded and we leave this place, but never from your presence, keep us all in your loving care and protection. God bless America. And let me ask all of you, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, for the gravity and the solemnity of today, let us please join in a moment of silence for the 2,977 people that lost their precious lives on that horrific day. God bless you. Amen.
Thank you so much, Senator. You may be seated. Governor Mike DeWine has spent his entire working career working hard for the citizens of Ohio. He served as a Greene County prosecuting attorney, a state senator, a United States congressman, a lieutenant governor, a United States senator, and state attorney general before assuming the office of Ohio's governor in 2019. Well, that's the official introduction. But I have to tell you, it is such a privilege for me to work for this man who has an incredible heart for service and for those who serve and for those who have experienced loss. And he understands how that stays with you forever and becomes a part of who you are when you've experienced a great loss. And that is what we're thinking about today. That is what today's ceremony and flag placement is about. So if I may introduce my boss, Governor Mike DeWine.
General, thank you very much. Senator Craig, thank you for your very great comments and your great prayer, moment of silence. 20 years ago, it's hard to believe. It's been 20 years. Each one of us remembers where we were, what we were doing, just like my parents' generation remembered what they were doing on December 7th, 1941. That day is seared in our memory forever. I was in the United States Senate. I was in the Russell building in my office. It was a beautiful day in Washington. My press secretary, Wes Irvin, came in, and I was in a meeting, and he came in, interrupted, and said, "Better turn on the TV. There's a plane has hit the World Trade Center." Turned it on and thought, I guess, as most Americans did at that time, there was this private plane somehow had just got off course and tragically hit that. And it wasn't too long right after that that we saw on TV with other Americans live that second plane hit. And we knew at that point that things were very different, and it was not what we thought it had been. I had a conference call scheduled that morning about that time, and we got on the call, and I was told that my state director, Barbara, was not on the call because her brother was in the World Trade Center. And later on we found that he was one of the people who had perished that day. There was really no, to tell you how unprepared we were in this country, the U.S. Capitol, there were no emergency plans, evacuation plans, at least none that I was aware of. But shortly after that, we sort of figured out we need to get out of there. So I got our staff and told them to leave. And really, we didn't know where to go. But we thought that, in all likelihood, they'd hit the World Trade Center. U.S. Capitol was a likely target. And so I just said, look, walk away from it. Go just the opposite direction from the Capitol. And that's what we did. On that terrible day, Senator Craig said 2,753 people were killed in New York. 184 people were killed at the Pentagon. And 40 people were killed on Flight 93. The flight that crashed in Pennsylvania when the passengers fought back and prevented that plane from reaching its intended target, the U.S. Capitol building. The flags that were are here will be put out. 2,977 flags represent each of those lives. I want to thank my predecessor, Governor Bob Taft, and his team. They're the ones who came up with this idea, and it's taken place ever since they first started it. So thank everyone who is involved in putting those flags out so that we do recall. Not long after, we always thank our first responders. They're always there. Not long after September 11th, the first Americans went into Afghanistan. And I think it's important, 20 years later, and it's important for the families who sent young men, young women to Afghanistan, as well as Iraq, to remember how much we are grateful for their sacrifice and why they went to Afghanistan. And we need to remind ourselves that Afghanistan was harboring terrorists, where the attacks came from, and that we needed to take action to protect the homeland. For their service, all of them who went, we are very, very grateful. Several weeks ago, in the evacuation from Afghanistan, we lost 13 brave U.S. service members. And in that 13 was a U.S. Navy corpsman, 22-year-old Max Saviak of Berlin Heights, Ohio. He was just a toddler at the time of 9/11. And so, on behalf of the people of the state of Ohio, I want to say to his mother and his father, to his siblings, all 12 of them, you have our deepest, deepest sympathy. He will be buried this Monday. He faced incredible risk, as did our other brave service members, to help his fellow Americans and our allies get safely out of Afghanistan. We're told he was very proud to serve in the U.S. Navy. He planned to make it a career. He wanted to help people. He was also not unlike the other Ohio service members who have served. Some who have died, some who have been injured in Afghanistan and Iraq. As we watched the news on our TV of what was happening in Afghanistan last month, I thought about the mothers and the fathers of the service members who did not come back, who lost their lives there. We owe them a great deal. And we extend to their families, their loved ones, our deepest sympathy. These service members represented the many faces of Ohio, really the many faces of America. Some came from the smallest villages in our state, some from the largest cities. Some came from our farms. Some were born in Ohio, born in America. But others were born in foreign lands, far away. Some were 18 or 19 years of age. Some were in their 40s. Some joined the military as a direct result of September 11th, while others planned on a career in the military from their youngest days, marching around as small children in their fathers' uniforms. Some had seen a lot of life, while others, most of them really, their lives had just begun. Despite their differences, all of them shared a lot in common. All of them have changed lives in countless ways, and they've left impact on their families, their friends, and their loved ones forever. So to all the veterans who served in Afghanistan and Iraq following the 9/11 attacks, we say thank you. We owe you a lot. The fact that we have been safe for 20 years in the United States is a direct result of what they did. We will remember them, and let me say to the families again, we will remember your sons, your daughters, your husbands, your wives, your brothers, and your sisters, and we will always be grateful. And to all the families who lost a loved one during the September 11th attacks on our nation, or who died later as a result of the cleanup of Ground Zero, we know that the sadness and loss will follow you forever. Our state and our nation continues to grieve with you. And we should remember the words of former President George Bush, who said, and I quote, "One of the worst days in American history saw some of the bravest acts in American history. We'll always honor the heroes of 9/11, and we pledge that we will never forget their sacrifice." End of quote. And so today, let us remember the victims who died on September 11th. Let us remember all who rushed to their aid, and let us remember those who have died in service to our country, so that we all may remain safe and free. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Let me also say thank you, First Lady, for being here. We always appreciate you gracing us with your presence and what you bring to every event that you attend. Thank you so much. So Jason Knox is with us today, and he has a message to us from Senator Rob Portman in Washington. Jason?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here on behalf of U.S. Senator Rob Portman. We are here to honor and remember the Americans that were lost 20 years ago in the worst terrorist attack in our history. 2 decades have passed, but the memories of those lost remain strong. In those acts of cowardice, we saw the worst of humanity, but in the response of our brave first responders and so many others, we also saw the best of humanity and of America. On that day, Americans showed extraordinary bravery in the face of adversity. Firefighters, police officers, emergency responders, and everyday citizens stepped forward and risked their lives for others. The fight to protect our country from terrorism continues today. Those who dedicate themselves to ending the American way of life still exist. And on this day and every day, we express our appreciation for our brave servicemen and women for their tireless efforts to protect us both here at home and abroad. As we commemorate the 20th anniversary of September 11th, we mourn for those who died that day. We also pray that God will watch over the brave men and women in harm's way, serving our country and keeping us safe. Thank you for having me on this very special day, and may God continue to bless all of you and our great country. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. You know, for many years in the Army, when we hear helicopters fly by, we were always told, there's the sound of freedom. But I have to tell you, on a day like today, when we're thinking about those first responders who, when everybody else is running away from the emergency, our first responders are rushing in, to have them coming and going while we're here in this ceremony just seems appropriate. So our next speaker is the Secretary of State, LaRose. Frank LaRose took office as Ohio's 51st Secretary of State on January 14, 2019. But prior to that, and prior to being elected in that statewide office, he had served 2 terms in the state Senate, representing the 27th District in Northeast Ohio. As Ohio's Secretary of State, Secretary LaRose is working to ensure Ohio's elections remain secure, accurate, and accessible. He's also supporting Ohio's entrepreneurs as the sole authority to receive and approve articles of incorporation for Ohio's businesses. Secretary LaRose is a combat veteran, having served in the United States Army, with the 101st Airborne, and ultimately with the Special Forces as a Green Beret. During his more than a decade in uniform around the globe, Secretary LaRose received numerous commendations and honor, including the Bronze Star. And yet he continues to serve today, or should I say serve again today, with the U.S. Armed Forces. Secretary LaRose?
Thank you, General. Never forget. Never forget. We've all said it. It's a hashtag. It's a slogan. It's something that's rolled off our lips, maybe even too casually, over the years. Why do we say that? Why is it so important that we remember? Why is it so important that we never forget? I want to explore a few of the reasons with you. Of course, first and foremost, we honor those nearly 3,000 who lost their life that day. We stand with those families that still today are mourning. We honor those who serve in the armed forces, who over the last 2 decades have bravely protected the homeland. My brothers and sisters in arms, that every time our nation calls, they answer, and they do so bravely, and they do so with great professionalism. We honor and we never forget those men and women who serve as our first responders. Some of them are represented here. Those men and women who, as the General said, run towards the problem, not away from the problem, who serve in a dedicated way to protect public safety every day in our communities. But as much as never forgetting is about all of those great Americans, there's a deeper lesson. The thing that I thought about a lot after September 11th is why. Why did these people hate us so much? Why did they harbor such evil hatred of our country? I've kept coming back to this, and I think that even after 20 years of reflection, it's still not something I fully understand. Hopefully I never fully understand that level of hatred. But I think it has something to do with them hating the same things that we love. The idea that this nation was founded on, unique among all the nations on the planet, America is founded on an idea. Most nations were founded on a set of geographical areas, a certain religion, a kingdom. America was founded on an idea that was radical 250 years ago, and it's still radical today. Human freedom. That every man and every woman is born endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the opportunity to choose who our leaders are, to petition for the redress of grievances. We were just in a committee hearing where people were telling us all the things that they don't like or all the things that they do like, the things that we love about this country. That idea of human freedom is the same things that our enemies hate. And you know what? They still hate it today. I want to try to capture that September 12th spirit. That idea of national unity, of us coming together around the things that we love as Americans. We can always find our differences. They are many. We know what they are. Left and right, Republican and Democrat, rich and poor, city and country. All that we can find all those differences, but the things that unite us are so much more profound. I hope that we never forget, so that we can work as a people to recapture that September 12th spirit. So we can see a rebirth of civic purpose. So we can see a uniting of this country around those ideas of human freedom and not focusing on the things where we differ, but those things that we share and those things that we love. Let us recommit ourselves to teaching our children about these things all over the world as we speak, in places like Iran and North Korea and China and Russia and too many more to mention. People are busy teaching their children right now to hate America. It's a fact. Let's make sure we never do that here. Let's teach our children to love America, and that means a full understanding of it with all of its flaws, and they may be many, but also with its strengths. That to me is what September 11th, never forgetting, into September 12th is all about. God bless the families of the fallen. God bless those who risk their lives today for others. In the Bible it says, hath no greater love than to lay down your life for your friends. So those that have the greatest love are those that sacrifice for others. Let's continue to keep them in our prayers. Let's continue to pray for the state of Ohio and for the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Rose. We appreciate your efforts. Appreciate everything you do for us in your public office, but also continuing your service in the military. Next, we will hear from Commissioner Crawley. Franklin County Commissioner Erica C. Crawley is a mother, an advocate, and a veteran. She served in the United States Navy before pursuing her master's in public administration and her Juris Doctorate. She's also a former member of the Ohio House of Representatives, where she proudly represented Ohio's 26th House District and fought for all children, families, and veterans. So proud to introduce Commissioner Crawley.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am deeply humbled to be joining you all today on this solemn day as we remember the people who lost their lives on September 11, 2001, and how it changed our world forever. And I always get emotional, so I'm going to try to get through this, so if you bear with me, please. While the flags that we will put in the ground are a beautiful tribute to those we are missing today, they also signify a loss of so much promise. The questions before us today are, how do we preserve the legacy of those we lost? How do we live up to the example of our first responders rushing into danger? And how do we keep the spirit alive in our own hearts? We all remember what we were doing that tragic day. It is etched in our memories. To me, I can remember like it just happened yesterday. I know what I was doing. I could smell the coffee that was brewing in my home. I had just gotten off of watch. I was in the Navy during that time, had not been in a year. I was a information systems technician. I had a top secret security clearance. I dealt with message traffic for the whole Atlantic Fleet. So that required me to speak with the captains of the ships or the admiral of the battle groups as our ships were in port or as they transitioned over the Mediterranean to foreign waters. I remember drinking coffee and watching the news as I did every morning when I could, watching the Today Show. And I remember confusion, anger, and heartbreak. I thought, just like many of you, that there was something going on with the first plane and it was an aviation error, but then saw the second plane and knew that we were in for something completely different. And as a Navy veteran now, but serving active duty then in Norfolk, Virginia, I saw thousands of men and women step up and answer their nation's call to serve and remember. My call was a year prior. If you remember, the USS Cole was bombed on October 12, 2000 in Yemen. That is when I enlisted into the military in October because I wanted to serve my country. I felt that calling. And I felt that same calling to serve and do everything that I could to protect the homeland. I was charged with supporting communication assets for our fleet that then went out to sea. My brother also served in Afghanistan. He was serving in the Army at that time. He was in Desert Storm. He proudly went over to Afghanistan. He also served in Iraq. So this wasn't just a tragedy that I remember, or that I remember each September. It is a calling that I remember that my family answered, and that we lived out for years until recently, and when my brother just retired. As I said, I was 19 when I enlisted in the Navy due to what happened in Yemen. And after September 11th, I met so many young people who were called to serve. And now 20 years later, and meeting our service members now who just enlisted and was happy to go right after high school or right after they finished college and went in as an officer, they have that fire to serve just like I did. And so on this day, we should not remember the lives that are lost and the sacrifices made by those who served, but we should acknowledge how the tragedy has impacted our entire world. And those that are currently serving and hope to serve, they look at what's going on in Afghanistan. And I thank the Afghan people who stood beside my brother and my colleagues to make sure that they were protected. And that's why it was important as a Franklin County Commissioner last week that we had a resolution to say that Franklin County is a welcoming place for all Afghans who want to come here, who have stood beside my brothers and sisters in uniform. And to the U.S. Navy sailor, who I will call my brother, who lost his life last week in Afghanistan, I say to you, brother, fair winds and following seas. Anchors aweigh, anchors aweigh. And as Americans, Ohioans, residents of Franklin County and Columbus, our duty is to remember the shared sacrifices of so many then and now, and to honor their memory in the work that we do each and every day. We are a resilient nation when we are united, and it's up to all of us to live our lives in pursuit of justice and equity and liberty for all. How we conduct ourselves each day as individuals, as a community, and as a nation is an opportunity that we have every day to live up to the sacrifice of those heroes that we lost. And in closing, I want to say to the families who lost a loved one, whether it was someone wearing the uniform, a first responder who rushed into harm's way, those in the towers who went to work that day thinking that they were going to be able to come home to their loved ones, or those who decided as a collective on the plane that went down in Shanksville to take back their plane, I say we will never forget. I will never forget. And I want to say thank you to my brothers and sisters who continue to wear the uniform today. I thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And our last speaker today, it seems just apropos that we would call on one of those who understands the heart of a service person who rushes in when everybody else is rushing out. Our last speaker today is Columbus Fire Chief Jeffrey Happ. Fire Chief Happ has served with the Columbus Division of Fire for 28 years. He's a certified Ohio Peace Officer Trainer for Homeland Security. Chief Happ, I turn the podium over to you.
Thank you, Director Ashenhurst, Senator Craig, Governor DeWine, First Lady, Secretary LaRose, Commissioner Crawley, Captain Garriott, Captain Riley, Lieutenant Johnson, first responders, and active military, veterans, and all the residents of Columbus and Franklin County. Thank you for taking the time to join us in honoring and remembering the brave and selfless heroes who risked their lives this nightmarish day almost 20 years ago. I'm incredibly humbled and grateful to be able to speak on behalf of first responders. On the morning of 9/11, Aaron McLean took a photo capturing a piece of this tragically historic day in our nation's history. This picture is of Ladder 118 crossing the Brooklyn Bridge, heading towards its final destination, the burning Twin Towers, not knowing that the ladder and its 6 crew members would not return back to the station that day. This picture strongly illustrates the duty, responsibility, and commitment we as firefighters have to the public in which we serve. Those 6 crew members had no idea they would be going home that night. They got in the ladder, turned on the lights and sirens, headed to their final destination, all without hesitation, because that was their duty as firefighters. Columbus firefighters are dispatched roughly 600 times a day. They all assume that we're returning home at night. They also know that someday they might not be able to. That is a sacrifice we all agree to. This is just one example of the sacrifices made that day. Another, a 24-year-old equities trader got a dozen people out of the World Trade Center and then went back with firefighters and police officers to save more. 2 former U.S. Marines put on their uniforms and searched through the rubble that could have collapsed at any time. They found 2 survivors. A former Vietnam vet and head of security's Morgan Stanley in the South Tower was responsible for saving more than 2,700 lives as he sang "God Bless America" on a blowhorn. 2 flight attendants on Flight 111 calmly relayed information on the hijackers that would help the FBI determine the perpetrators were Al-Qaeda. Not all who made sacrifices that day were bound by an oath. For many years, each and every American could recall when and where they were at the time we realized our nation was under attack, and how, as a country, we came together and persevered through the pain and heartbreak. For police officers and firefighters, this is a calling, not just a job. We instill values of protecting and helping others through all kinds of tragedies. Firefighters throughout the country came to assist in the aftermath in this horrific day, and a lot of these same people respond to natural disasters and tragic accidents like the Surfside building collapse earlier this year. While we will never forget their sacrifice that day, this is an example of our duty as firefighters. To be there while our nation is under attack, or whatever or wherever the disaster strikes. The pain and heartbreak from 9/11 will never go away, but neither will our remembrance. Remembrance of our first responders. Remembrance of the innocent people who gave their lives to save another. Remembrance of our nation standing together as one, and especially remembrance of the innocent victims who died that day. I leave you with a quote from Jeff Parnas. Quote, "When Americans lend a hand to one another, nothing is impossible." We're not about what happened on 9/11. We're about what happened on 9/12. End quote. May God bless you all. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Chief. Thanks to all of our speakers here today. You know, remembering 9/11 is important to me because it was on that day that we were reminded how precious our freedom is and that our country represents something greater than each of us. And I hope that we can, 20 years later, recreate that bond, that sense of caring for each other, and the swell of patriotism that we felt in the days following that fateful day. So thank you to the Capitol Square Review and Advisory Board for hosting this memorial since 2002, I understand, here at the State House. Thank you to all who are here today who are going to help install the flags. There are 2,977 flags, one for each of the victims. The placement of flags will replicate the twin towers of the World Trade Center with a hole in the middle in the shape of the Pentagon and a green strip to represent the crash site of Flight 9/11 in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Sound of freedom, Chief. To assist with the placement of the flags, please report to the table over here on my left, your right, with John Hutt. We'll give you further instructions on how the rest of the evening will go with that placement. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for always remembering.